So let's get started. Welcome everyone to the January 17th, 2024 Fish and Wildlife Board meeting. I am Michael Bancroft, filling in as chair for Brad Ferland, who unfortunately can't make it, but will be joining us virtually today. So before we start, why don't we go around the room and board members, please introduce yourself. Nick, we'll start with you.
Nicholas Burnham, Ulster County.
Martin Van Buren, Rutland County.
Allison Frazier, Chittenden County. Didn't skip you.
No,
Bob Patterson, Addison County.
Brian Bailey, Washington County.
and virtual.
Brian McCarthy, Grand Isle County.
Michael Colson from Essex County.
Brad Ferland, Caledonia County.
Paul Noel, Orly.
We're working on sound.
Jay Sweeney, Franklin County.
Neil Hogan, Bennington County.
You hear us?
Yes, we can.
Well, we could. Not hearing anything now.
Commissioner Herrick, could you say something, please?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
I can hear everybody that's remote, just as an FYI.
They can't hear you say that, Brian.
But I was sharing that with you guys.
We
Yep.
don't care.
Same thing here.
Michael Colson, you got ice up there?
Oh, the Olympic skating competition will be in my driveway.
Mhm.
But the pond, let's see, Averill Pond's got 9 inches.
Younger than me, maybe.
Well, I imagine Wallace Pond's got ice.
Oh, I bet it does.
They're just starting to form here on the lake.
Air in here.
I think I got it. Chris, can you say something?
Yep, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
It was your presence.
All right, would that have recorded on there? Do we need to? Let's go back around and hear from the board members virtual, please. Please reintroduce yourselves.
This is Brian McCarthy, Grand Isle County.
Michael Colson, Essex County.
Brad Ferland, Caledonia County.
Paul Noel,
Orleans
County.
Neil Hogan, Bennington County.
Jay Sweeney, Franklin. Just know that we get an awful.
Awful feedback.
Yeah, we could hear. Your is exposed.
If you are not speaking and you're on virtual, please mute yourself. Also, if you are not a board member or part with the department, please turn your camera off. Thank you.
And you have me, Mr. Chairman, right?
I do now.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now I'll turn it over to the commissioner who is online to introduce anyone from the department who might be virtual.
Good evening. I wanted to let you know that I'm attending this meeting from home because my daughter flew in from Denver this week, and in order to spend more time with her, I thought I would attend this meeting virtually. With me tonight, I'm going to have Major Fowler introduce some new faces in the room, and then we'll go over to Abigail and go for the staff in the room, and then we'll work on folks that are remote. So with that, why don't we start with Major Fowler?
Thanks, Commissioner. I'm actually gonna turn it over to the Colonel because he's here.
Oh, I did not
Right in
see
the
him.
corner. I'm hiding in the back, Commissioner. Colonel Justin Stedman.
All right, well, go ahead then, Colonel.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce, these are our three newest wardens who were just sworn in yesterday. Go ahead and yell. So first is Chase Regan, Cody Rhodes, and Chris Floriani. They're all Vermonters. So we're continuing the tradition of Vermonters serving other Vermonters. So their heads are spinning a little bit. They just got a whole introduction into state timesheets, which you need to do. If they look a little glazed over, don't. But no, they're just starting. They got a long year plus of training ahead of them. But we're off. They're really good young men. We're excited to have. Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, Abigail, I'll let you point out who's in the room, please. They can introduce themselves.
Bill Connolly, assistant.
Nick Horton, Deer Moose Project Leader. Sean Fowler, Major for the Warden Service.
Wes Waller, Central Lieutenant.
Bella Klein, I have the Randolph District. Taking.
Is that everyone?
A couple more.
Tony McCool.
David Sawsville, Essex Junction, Program Manager for Wildlife Management.
Don Austin, the Director of Wildlife.
And that is it. Thank you, everyone.
And I see Allie Thomas is online, and I don't see anyone else. If there is somebody, feel free to go ahead. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. All right. First item on the agenda is approval of previous meeting minutes from the December 14th meeting. Hopefully everyone received them and was able to review them. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept it. Brendan.
Second motion.
Any discussion? Corrections? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain. I was absent.
Thank you, David. All right, moving along. Item number 2, public comments. So this is a working board meeting, but we do like to hear from the public. So we allow folks to speak for up to 2 minutes. Feel free to ask questions, say anything, provide feedback, but this is not a back and forth. If you do have a question that you'd like answered by the department, feel free to send an email to a board member or someone you know on the department. So first we'll start here in the room. We'll hear from anyone who would like to speak. Abigail or someone will be timing you. So when 2 minutes rolls around, I'll ask you to please wrap it up. After we deal with everyone in the meeting room, we'll then go virtual. Virtual folks who want to speak, please raise your hand. For folks in the room, when you want to speak, we have a camera and microphones here. So I guess stand behind me or beside me so that everyone can hear and see you. All right, so we do have a list. Rod, we'll start with you. Please state your name, town of residence.
Rod Coronado with Town of Orange, also Vermont Wildlife Patrol. And Happy New Year, everybody. And thank you guys for joining the force to defend Vermont's wildlife. I'd like to speak to the coyote hunting with hounds season that is, I understand is going to begin very shortly. And I've been a part of the process. I've been coming to all the meetings. I've been paying attention to all the legislative sessions. I was at all the ALCAR hearings. And we are definitely at an important crux I believe, for the board, the department, and the public. The legislators of the state clearly believe that there is still a moratorium on the hunting of coyotes with hounds. The department has decided to move forward. And that is been a lot of the product of what one board member said was taking in a lot of input from people that you did want to listen to and not really taking in the opinions from others in regards to control and the use of GPS collars. I've always been suspicious of hunting that requires satellites. I don't know why anybody should. I grew up hunting deer in the West Coast, and I used to track deer, spend a lot of time in the field. That's how I hunted. There's going to be a lot of eyes on the season this year, and there's legislation, S-258, to ban the practice outright. There's also that legislation is to reform the Fish and Wildlife Board. I think that those proposed legislation such as that is a product of not taking into account all the outside opinions. Like I said earlier, David Dean had represented that all the opinions regarding GPS and control were pretty much from hound hunters in the hunting community. So a lot of eyes are on the hunting community. I hope people keep it clean and ethical. I hope that we don't see any teeth on fur. That's a big concern for me, is the actual cruelty involved when hunters aren't actually at the site where an animal is being killed. That's all I have to say, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Dave Furman.
No, just thanks for the opportunity. I'm here to speak about the ability to field quarter deer and bear in Vermont. I sent an email to a couple of folks that I think some folks in the room have seen. I think this is something that would be a real benefit for both hunters as well as, I don't see any negatives for anybody. I've spoken to a couple of folks. I think it would allow people, if they could explicitly do this, to reduce the likelihood of any meat being wasted, especially in warm weather. I think it would provide better access for more people to hunt without the barrier of a physical limitation. And I think this would, I think it would offer an avenue for more people to value big remote open space. So I'm here. There's a couple of folks that I've spoken with about this, just to offer myself and the group of folks that I've been in communication with around it as hopefully to help utilize our experience, because I would like to see a regulation developed around this. So I'm hopeful that we can help with that as you're working on it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll
help you with that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Lars Ruley, Marshfield. Good to see some familiar faces in the room. Vermont is conspicuous across northern New England and New York in not having a clear permission, regulation published allowing the field quartering of deer. We do allow it very clearly for moose for obvious reasons, but not for deer. And from what we've heard from other folks around northern New England and certainly western states where it's allowed, talking to biologists here, there's really no significant drawback in terms of biological data that would be lost. The benefits, I think, of having that kind of regulation clearly published, much along the lines of what Dave said. One is just accessibility. A lot of folks who are interested in hunting, gear is an issue, and a truck is a big piece of gear. And having to transport a whole deer in the back of a car is not something I recommend. I've done it, but it's not a grand thing to have to do. And if you could just quarter it and put it in coolers or plastic bags, it'd be really easy for a lot more folks to have access to hunting. Safety is an issue. I mean, there are some pretty tough places to drag deer out of. I've got a place I like to hunt that's like a 10-minute walk from home, but it's an hour and a half drag and some really steep country, and it can be really tough and sometimes feel kind of risky to be pulling a deer out alone there. And lastly, I know a number of older hunters who have stopped hunting because they just can't confidently drag deer out of the woods anymore. But if they could pack it out in 20, 25-pound packages, that'd be a totally different game, you know, for them. So they can retain some hunters a bit longer as well. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anyone else who wanted to speak? All right, now we'll turn to virtual. So anyone from the public who would like to speak, please raise your hand, except Brad. Unless Brad, do you have a question? You are muted. Okay. Anyone from the public, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. All right, Brian, you have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed that, and I've spoken to many people about this, about the setbacks on my line, my land, a 50-foot setback. And my land is on Route 100, and I have a tree farm there. And I think that anybody who's walking their dog without a leash there with a 50-mile-per-hour limit is extremely foolhardy. Now, I pay taxes in the town of, in Bennington County, and I don't think I should be told I have a 100-foot setback because I'm near some trail on my land, or 50-foot because I'm near a highway. So I wish you folks would revisit that and let me do what I want on my land. I'm not causing a public nuisance. And like I said, I pay taxes. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. Anyone else virtual? No one. There we go. Sorry. Doesn't look like. All right, well, that's it for public comment. Thank you, everyone. Commissioner Herrick?
Yes, I know we said the public comment is not a back and forth, but I believe the two people who commented are still in the room. And in case they're going to leave, I thought the board should be aware, as I think they should have been notified. There is no prohibition to quartering deer in the field, and therefore it is already allowed. And so if the request is for the department to make it clearer in education or in our publications, we'll look at that, but we're not going to be able to change it at least till next year because they're already published for this year. But I think it's important to note that the laws that are written are restrictive. If it's not addressed, then it's legal. And so I've run this by Catherine, and the colonel and the major are there as well. So just so everyone's clear, it is already allowed.
Thank you, Commissioner.
What about bear? For all, okay, thank you.
So the reporting requires the carcass, and the definition of a carcass is simply the animal still with bone. So what is not legal would be processing, partially processing, deboning and all. But if you take bear, cut it into 4 pieces and bring it down to the reporting station, you've met the report. If you self-report, if you cut it into 4 sections and report it, actually, quite honestly, if you report it on your phone, you could then debone it, pack it out as long as you've labeled the pack. So, yeah, it just needs a little bit of clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Brad, did you have another?
I do. I'm just curious that if we wanted to do something, if there was a desire to do something around enhancing that or anything around that particular option to do that, is that something the board is responsible to do, or is that the department that deals with that particular allowance or disallowance?
It's covered by board regulation. It's Appendix 2 within Title 10, which is not statutory, it's regulatory. So that's your purview.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
But
Oh.
I just have one more question on that. I guess I'll direct it over there, Colonel. So I just want to clarify, even during rifle deer, you can bring quarters to a check-in station. That is still required, but bringing the quartered sections is, okay.
Yeah, the language in the appendix says carcass. It doesn't say whole. It just says the carcass. So 4 parts, 3 parts, 2 parts, or whatever makes the, whatever you bring out, as long as you're not deboning it, that would be the issue there, right? So you can't self-report.
Thank you.
The mechanism has already been granted to the commissioner by the board in the same regulation. The regulation says reported in a manner advised or something to that effect by the commissioner. So the board has already done that when they adopted that rule. So if the board wanted the commissioner to make something more clear, the commissioner has the authority to do that already.
Yeah, thank you for that. Paul, I feel like we're gonna need to add this to the agenda, but go ahead, Paul.
Oh, yeah. I had a little trouble hearing the wardens. So boning the deer out is not allowed even if you self-report online, is that correct?
It is. If you report, once your deer is reported, you can debone it. So. Because
Not in the woods.
the requirement for reporting says the carcass, but if you do it on your phone in the woods, you've met the requirement of the statute of reporting the deer. At that point, you can then debone it. You just have to make sure you label every package of meat as prescribed by the regulation. So if you put your deer into 10, 25 or 5 25 gallon or 25 quart Ziploc bags, you just have to make sure you write your name and all the information on it, and you're good to go. If you've reported it already. If you haven't reported it on your phone and you bring it to a reporting station, you can bring it in pieces, but it has to be bone in because it has not yet been reported.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, keep it going, Brad.
Moving on, just a little different subject, but I think we're done public comments. Is there any reason to approve the agenda as presented? Are we adding anything to the agenda that we should do publicly?
Yes.
Okay.
So, after agenda item 3, we would like to discuss entering an executive session. So do we need a motion to amend the agenda?
I think you can do it just with consensus.
Yeah, the chair can do it if there's no objection from a board member.
That's right.
All right, are there any objections to me writing number 4, discussing executive session? Thank you for that, Brad. All right, moving on from public comments, let's move on to item number 3, review of 2023 deer hunting season. So I will hand it over to the commissioner.
Yes, thank you. So we're gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I think that's still legal. And I'm going to introduce John Austin, the new wildlife director, who's going to give you a little bit more of his background, and then he will introduce Nick Fortin for the actual report. So with that, Director Austin.
Thank you, Commissioner. I wonder if I sit here, people online will be able to see me rather than standing behind you, Mr. Chair.
You're not.
I'm not in the frame.
You can come here.
How about there?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yes.
Get this one. Thank you.
Now you're in view.
It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. This is my first in-person board meeting since I've taken over from Mark Scott as the Director of Wildlife. I appreciate the commissioner giving me an opportunity to share with you a little bit more detail in terms of my background and commitment to the department. I've been with the department, believe it or not, despite my youthful appearance, I've been with the department for 30 years. And even before starting with the department as a wildlife biologist 30 years ago, when I was in college, back in 1983, 84, some of my first jobs as an exposure to the natural resource profession as a seasonal with this department. So I've been with the organization a long time. And I can tell you that after all these years, I still get up every morning and am grateful to go to work and have my job be to represent the public's interests in wildlife conservation in the state of Vermont, of all places. There's 35 of us that get to say we do that as a job, as a career. There's a lot of people who give their left arm to do that, and I don't take it for granted. So it's a privilege, and it's a privilege to get to work with the colleagues like David Sauceville, Dick Fortin, Abigail Connolly, Tony McCula, and all of the other wonderful experts that we have in the department that make fish and wildlife conservation happen every day. I started with the department as a full-time employee as a wildlife biologist out of the Berry District. And my primary responsibilities at the time were wildlife habitat protection through the Act 250 process and working with the Public Utility Commission and dealing with wetlands permitting and that sort of thing. But also dabbled in state lands management and worked on the waterfowl project at the time, dealt with woodcock conservation and that sort of thing. In 2008, there was a transition in administration, and there was an opportunity to serve as an acting wildlife division director. And for better or for worse, looking back, in my view, personally, I'm not sure it was the best move at the time, but I served as acting division director for a couple of years from 2008 to 2010, at which point Mark Scott stepped in, which I was so grateful for because I have deep respect for Mark. I have big shoes to fill, so I'm going to try really hard not to disappoint you. But I got a lot to learn because from 2010 until 3 months ago, I was David Sauceville's counterpart. I was the Lands and Habitat Program Manager. So I was responsible for the oversight of all of the department's interests in land conservation and management, from our work in the regulatory processes and protecting habitat, to buying and managing land, to working with private landowners, to working with our federal partners, to working with colleagues like Heather Furman from the Nature Conservancy on various conservation planning efforts. So I really enjoyed that role. It was very rewarding and fulfilling for me. It really plays to my background. I went to school at the University of Vermont in the wildlife program with David. Actually, we were students there together. And then later went to the Vermont Law School for a degree in environmental law and policy, which probably seems a little odd given where I am and what I do now, but it seemed like the right thing at the time. It convinced me that I had no interest in practicing law. So when Mark Scott retired, and I'm good friends with Mark, and he's been a mentor to me over the years, so I have a lot of respect for him. When Mark retired, to be honest, I had to think long and hard about whether or not this was a move that really played to my skills and interests at this point in life. But I respect our commissioner. I have deep respect for all of my colleagues in this organization. I care a great deal about the organization and its future. And in what time I have left with the organization, I want to do whatever I can to support it and to advance good wildlife conservation. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to get to work with all of you and help serve your interests, and have a lot of respect for all of you and what you do and your contribution to the board. So enough about myself. And I love hunting and fishing. That is what governs my life outside of my work life. I live for that. So tonight you're going to hear the update on how the moose season and the deer season went for 2023. And I think you're probably all familiar with David Sawsville and Nick Fortin. David Sawsville is our program manager for the Wildlife Management Program in the Wildlife Division. For context, the Wildlife Division is organized by 3 programs. We have the Wildlife Management Program, which David oversees, and that deals with all of the issues that you're focused on, our hunting issues, our trapping issues, deer, bear, moose, black bear, wild turkey, waterfowl, all of that. We have the Wildlife Diversity Program, which Rosalind Renfrew oversees, and they deal with natural communities, rare plants and animals, threatened and endangered species, species recovery, that sort of thing. And then we have the Lands and Habitat Program, which I had overseen, still am until we replace my position. And that deals with everything land and habitat, really. So in David's role with the Wildlife Management Program, he works very closely with Nick Fortin, our deer project leader and moose project leader, and all of the other outstanding biologists that guide our bear project, our waterfowl project, our turkey and upland game bird project, and all of that. And then Nick, of course, I think you've probably all met Nick before. I have a lot of respect for Nick. His job is one of the most difficult jobs in this department. And it takes a lot of skill and a lot of fortitude to deal with, you know, having everybody with an opinion about deer and moose management, and you just can never quite get it right. And yet he is brilliant at dealing with this sort of thing. I got a lot to learn from him in this new capacity. But Nick has been with us in this role for nearly 10 years. And that's a long run in the deer project. I think the only person to surpass that was John Buck, who somehow, by miracle, lasted over 15 years in that role. So you're not going anywhere, Nick. We need you. So Nick is going to give us the rundown on how the seasons went this last fall, and I'll turn it over to you in just a moment, Nick. But David, would you like to introduce Tony McCula?
Folks, I asked Tony McCula to join us tonight because we're doing some transition within the section. Tony is going to be taking over our upland game bird project, so that's turkey, grouse, and Chris Bernier is going to be transitioning into more of a lands management section, and he's going to be mentoring Tony and showing her the ropes over the next 9 to 12 months, and as she takes over, she'll be doing that. But a little background on Tony: she has a BS in wildlife and fisheries science from Penn State, and she has a master's in natural resource wildlife ecology from University of New Hampshire, and her graduate study was on New England cottontails. So she does kind of a mixed bag of animals that she's worked with. She started with us in March of 2017, so she's been a little over 7 years, almost going on 8 years now. And she has done state lands management on our wildlife management areas. She's helped extensively with the waterfowl management program. She is integral in our land acquisition and restoration work with wetlands through our EPA grants that we have, and anything else that we've been throwing at her. I mean, she's kind of a jack of all trades that has helped us out. She's been dealing with wildlife disease kits in response, and so Tony is, as she mentioned, is out of our Essex Junction office, and we expect to probably be seeing her quite a bit over the next several years, and just wanted to welcome her.
Thank you, David. And welcome, Tony. I'll also say, I don't know if you mentioned this, David, but one of the really other interesting things that Tony's responsible for is leading our spiny softshell turtle recovery efforts on Lake Champlain. So we ask our staff to take on a lot of diverse responsibilities, small organization with a lot of important work to do. And just to note, David has been with the organization now for going on 25 years or more. And was our refuge manager at Dead Creek years ago, and was our waterfowl project leader, and has played many roles with land management and wetland restoration and all that sort of thing. And Nick, as I said, going on 10 years with the deer project and the moose project, and just really an outstanding wildlife professional. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Nick, to share the results this evening.
Thank you, John. Let's see if I can
So obviously I'm gonna go over the deer project update. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at the handout. And those of you online had a chance to, I think they got an email, right? I've had a chance to look at that. I pretty much cover all that. Before I get into deer, I want to touch quick on moose season results. I think you all got the harvest report as well for more detail. Just real quick, 178 moose this past fall. That was considerably less than the roughly 100 we were predicting. I would attribute most of that to weather. It rained for the first 3 days of the season, which does not affect moose in any way, shape, or form, but it does affect hunters. And hunting from your vehicle is not an effective way to hunt moose anymore. So I think that probably influenced our harvest some. But anyway, 78 moose. Archery season was 10 moose, all bulls. We ended up with 23 hunters because all 3 auction permit winners elected to archery hunt. So that works out to a 43% success rate, which is perfectly normal for archery. Fluctuates around 50%, but that's very much within the margin of error. Regular season harvest, again, that was where the weather had the bigger influence. 68 moose, as you can see there, are either sex hunters, so hunters who shoot bulls or cows, ended up with a 54% success rate, which is pretty low. We typically expect closer to 65 to 70% success for those permits. So that was definitely impacted. I guess of note there also is of the 31 moose, those either sex hunters shot, only 3 of them were cows or calves. They could have shot calves and calves. They chose not to. So there's some serious selectivity going on with those hunters, more so than historically. And then the antlerless only permits, the cow permits, 37% success, which I don't know if it's the lowest success we've ever had with antlerless only permits, but it's pretty close. Again, tough weather, late season timing, a lot of factors go into that. We've also never issued this many antlerless only permits with this few moose on the landscape. So probably should have expected a lower success rate than we did, but this is where we ended up. We'll talk a lot more about moose next month, so I'm not going to go any further than that now. We can get into a lot of details in February. So deer harvest, I do want to emphasize, it says on there, those numbers are preliminary. I already know there were 40 deer added this afternoon, so those are not right. I think that's it. I don't think there'll be any more added, but our final tally this year, what's currently in our system is 16,800, and I think it's 848 right now. So a little bit higher than what's on. We're pretty much staying consistent with where we've been for the last 7 years, 8 years in a row now. Our buck harvest was just shy of 9,000, 9,800 and whatever, a little over 9,800. Our antlerless harvest came down this year. That is concerning to me. It was considerably short of what we were hoping for an antlerless harvest. And, there was more opportunity. We issued more permits. Archery season didn't change. So I'll get into why I think that was in a bit, but that is a bit of a concern. So archery, the big pattern this year was that hunting in October sucked and hunting in November and December was pretty good. October was really warm, and actually if you look back at the weather, it rained almost every weekend in October. Some of those are pretty significant rain events, which again keeps hunters out of the woods more than anything. So archery harvest was down from 2022. It's obviously fluctuated a lot the last 4 years under the new regulation structure. But I think a lot of the drop from 2022 was that really poor weather in October. Either warm or it was raining. And this is most of the reason I think our antlerless harvest came up short. Shortcoming in archery. You notice the buck harvest, the darker green part at the bottom did not really change much. Less than 100 deer different. The antlerless harvest is almost 1,000 deer. Than 2022. So again, that hunter selectivity thing coming in, which not easy to predict. Youth season, not a good long-term trend there. I'll touch more on this in a bit, but this was the lowest youth weekend harvest we have had. Fourth consecutive year I've said this, but this is the lowest youth weekend harvest we've had since it's been a 2-day season, which started in 2002. So we continue to trend in the wrong direction. Like I said, I'm going to touch on this a bit more. Regular season, so rifle season, that is trending in a better direction. Generally upward. We were, I think, a little over $7,500 this year. That is, we are currently at the second highest rifle season harvest on this chart, but you'd have to go back to 2002 on another one. It got up higher. So rifle season was pretty good. And again, you know, it overall looks like it's trending up. Realistically, we've been pretty flat for the last years. Very consistent rifle season. Muzzleloader. This is combined muzzleloader. So both the October and the December muzzleloader seasons combined. You can see this fluctuates a lot, largely driven by the blue line there, which is the number of permits, antlerless permits we issue. There's obviously a pretty strong correlation between how many permits we give out and how many antlerless deer are harvested. Unfortunately, it's become harder and harder to get rid of all those permits in recent years. So that's why we're kind of falling well below the blue line now. Again, a little bit of an uptick this year. I don't have the final number of permits we actually sold, so I don't know the success rate yet. But I think it's going to be pretty consistent with where it's been the last 2 years, right around 14% fill rate. Again, with this, the October muzzleloader season, not so good. Kill was down. I think the lowest kill we've had in that season. December, we actually did pretty well. So again, that weather in October really kind of messed with things. And so obviously there's a lot of variety in the seasons. There's also differences depending where you are in the state, how hunters might perceive how good the season was. I really hate statewide generalizations with deer. They're meaningless. But if you zoom in a lot, some hunters experienced a very different thing year over year than others did. Central and northern Vermont seems like our buck population is increasing. Harvest certainly is. And this is all bucks in all seasons, not just sprints. But then you get kind of southern half of the state and oddly the southern Champlain Valley too. Populations or buck harvest was either stable or declined, which could be a real thing. Could be differences going on there. That could, when you see broad regional patterns like this though, that's probably not our management that's driving that. There's no patterns here with like where we have antler restrictions or don't, or where we're killing more antlerless deer or not. This sort of thing, especially when it's north-south, is often driven by food. Acorn crops. We know beech mast was a good beech mast year in southern Vermont this year, not in northern Vermont. So that could have played with something. There's probably some larger factor at play than any of our management. So I guess if anyone has questions on the deer harvest before I move on, happy to answer those now.
So, and maybe the answer is what you just mentioned. So you said the archery harvest of antlerless or just archery in general fluctuates pretty significantly, and this year was due to weather. Rifle harvest has been very consistent, but we've had very differing weather every year. What's the reason?
So the short answer is I don't know. But most likely what it is largely driven by the length of the season. Right? Rifle season is a very narrow window. We know people take that time to hunt, at least the weekends. They're gonna hunt no matter, regardless of the conditions. Archery season, I think part of why we might be seeing more fluctuation now than before the regulation changes is in making it longer, we've given hunters that flexibility
to not hunt when the weather's not. So I think we're probably seeing greater fluctuations, greater impact of weather than we might have. That's speculation, but it makes sense, tracks what we know about hunter participation and stuff, so.
Brad?
Yeah, thank you. I have a quick question about the youth numbers and the decline in the that harvest number. And I'm just interested to know how that correlates to the amount of youth licenses that we've sold, if that's also showing a downward trend. Because I'm thinking about, the governor just in the last couple of weeks was talking about demographics and how we have, I think it was something like 14 or 15,000 less 18-year-olds or younger in Vermont today than we did just in 2010. And I'm just wondering if that's really what we're seeing play out, and as it correlates to the, just in everything in general, fewer younger people, and or if the license sales are still up as compared to last year, and it's just they're not harvesting the deer. Just interested how all that plays together.
Yeah, Brad, it's a great question. I'm gonna touch on some of that in a bit here, so I'm not gonna fully answer your question right now, but you are correct in that not just I don't have our license sale numbers, so I don't know the youth deer weekend tag sales right now. But as you mentioned, the number of youths in the state has been declining for probably 20 years at this point. So that is undoubtedly part of the longer term trend. But I think there's a couple other things going on that I'll touch on in a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're gonna talk about the licenses next one.
I don't have the youth license.
Like rifle and muzzleloader, archery.
Not that, no.
Or just, is the numbers up or down there?
For license
and muzzleloader, rifle.
I don't know the licenses. I think Chris did.
We can get those numbers for licenses and send them out.
Okay.
Can I suggest that maybe we hold off on the license discussion and we'll have Chris Saunders come in and do a comprehensive review of all our license sales?
Commissioner, I think in terms of, as we see this data, as just to see what kind of results that we have here relative to the amount of permits we issued and so on and so forth, it almost seems like the amount of and from my perspective, and you may have a different perspective, but it almost seems like the missing piece of this presentation is the amount of licenses that we sell. Because
right, but we don't have that tonight, and we can draw that correlation later. But I think it might be worth the board seeing what licenses look like overall, what the trend line is for both fishing and hunting.
Agreed. I absolutely agree.
All right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I will caveat that a little bit. Youth weekend, yes, we can get great data on how many people buy a youth weekend deer license. Muzzleloader is extremely difficult because most permanent license holders can muzzleload. We have absolutely no idea if they do or not. Right? It's on their license when they renew it, but we have no idea if they actually do. We may try to get that with some survey data that we're going to hope to do this winter, but license sales aren't perfect, but they would be in this case. Any other deer questions before we move on?
Are you going to touch on any impacts or trends you're monitoring from the deer rule change?
That's a great segue. Yeah, so I do. That is exactly what I want to touch on right now. A little bit of kind of what we're monitoring, what we've noticed with the rule changes, just a brief insight, and where we're going timeline wise with anything there. So a review
of our timeline here, because recognizing most of the board members were not on the board when we passed these rule changes. We passed our package of deer regulation changes in the fall of 2019, September of 2019. At that time, the board and department agreed, it's not a binding formal vote of any kind, but there was a vote. The board agreed to no further changes for 5 years, which basically, you know, we need that time to actually see what happens, let kind of the dust settle, et cetera, et cetera. The changes took effect in 2020. As you all hopefully remember, that was a pandemic. Things were not normal. It greatly affected hunter participation and our harvest in many ways. Not to say data from that year are not useful, but sometimes they're not. Most often they are, but there's a lot of caveats with 2020 data that kind of complicate things. Regardless, we just finished 2023, which was year 4 under our new regulations. Next year will be the 5th year. Our hope at this point is that a year from now, we'll be starting discussions on what might need to change, if anything. What regulations we might want to tweak. If we get that done in next winter, it could potentially be for the 2026 seasons. I mean, you could change things quicker. We don't need to get that far down the road, but we hope to have this kind of more in-depth discussion next winter. So a few items we know we want to look at. Should we move youth, or what is now youth novice weekend, back to where it was? It used to be the weekend prior to the regular season, prior to rifle season. So this again, because our concern here, you know, as Brad alluded to, we know we just have fewer youth, period. And our youth weekend tag sales, I don't have the most recent years, but you know, up to 2020 at least, was trending largely how this harvest is trending, which just follows the number of youth that are in the state. So yes, we have fewer youth, but since 2020, our harvest has been notably lower. Anecdotally, at this point, which is the best we have so far, it appears 2 things have impacted our harvest. One is the weekend before rifle season is prime time to be deer hunting. Deer are super active. It's pre-rut period. 2 weeks earlier than that is not a great time to be deer hunting. What many call the October lull. It's a period where deer are kind of changing their behavior. They're less active. So deer activity is definitely a factor. The other big one, which our staff have noticed at check stations, so we man a lot of check stations on youth weekend to collect a lot of the biological data that you all see in an antlerless harvest. It seems there are a lot more conflicts now for kids. First week in November, all fall sports are done, unless you're in the state championships for football. 2 weeks earlier, almost everyone is still playing. So you have all of your fall sports still going on. We have a ton of kids come in, you know, checking in a deer family with multiple kids. And, oh, you going back out? No, so-and-so's got a football game tomorrow or a soccer game tomorrow. So I think even if our tag sales have stayed up, there's a lot less hunting potentially going on. Or, you know, they're not able to spend as much time in the woods. So those are the things we're concerned about. Don't have great solid data on that. We hope again this winter, we're hoping to do some surveys of deer hunters. This is one thing we want to try to drill into and see how hunters actually feel about this. But from our perspective, it seems like moving it back might be a better option. I guess important to mention also, the reason it was moved up, the primary reason it was moved up, was to continue to offer youth the first opportunity with a firearm. So we made that October muzzleloader season, and some folks felt it was very important that youth be the first opportunity. So we moved youth season ahead of that. That's probably still an important consideration, but whether it outweighs the potential drawbacks, something we need to look into and start thinking about. Another thing to consider, actually establishing expanded archery zones. So we put in the rule in 2020 there is an expanded archery season that starts September 15th in expanded archery zones, but there are no expanded archery zones. Our hope at that time, my hope particularly, was that we'd be able to kind of work with these communities before we established an expanded archery zone and before we sent a bunch of hunters in there. Try to minimize any conflicts that might occur or get ahead of them at least. That was in September of 2019. In December of 2019, I also became a moose biologist, and so I haven't had time to do any of that. Among all the other things that have happened since 2020. But so anyway, we haven't had time to do that, but we really do need to actually establish some of those expanded archery zones. We also really need to think about how can we harvest more antlerless deer in some WMUs. I will very much emphasize here that in most of the state, we can harvest all of the antlerless deer we want. However, there are a few WMUs currently. I would categorize them as the western side of the state, Champlain Valley, K&N. So WMUs A, B, F1, F2, K&N, where we cannot harvest more antlerless deer. We do not have another lever to pull. Can't give out more muzzleloader antlerless permits. There aren't enough hunters to take them. Archers are doing whatever they're going to do at this point. How do we harvest more antlerless deer in those zones? There are a lot of potential options, but we need another lever to pull. And especially when our winters continue to be non-existent. So we need another lever.
Hey, Nick.
Yes, Brett.
Quick question. I think I know the answer to this, but just if you could confirm. Currently, the only well, aside from archery, muzzleloader is the only way that we can take antlerless with muzzleloader and archery. We cannot take antlerless deer with rifles, correct?
That is correct. Other than youth and novice hunters, that is correct. Yes.
Youth and novice, okay. So it's not like all right, let's let people take a antlerless deer during the traditional 2-week rifle season. That would require a statutory change if that was one of the options we chose to take.
No. It is not prohibited by statute anymore. Hasn't been for a while.
Gotcha.
That is an option that could be considered.
And okay, so that's a board rule or through the board rulemaking process?
Yeah, we would just have to clarify that however we decided to do it, right? You could allow antlerless permits to be used during rifle season. You could allow rifles to be used during the October muzzleloader season. There's lots of things you could just clarify that in the board rule, and rifles would be legal,
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the area that shows zero change in take this year is the area that I come from, where we continue to have a problem with overbrowse in our working forest. So at some point, if we do take up the whole notion of the issue you touched on, Brad, a antlerless rifle season, I certainly would engage in that conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, and then the last thing I want to touch on that I know some of you have raised already. I know Brad has raised this related to how many yearlings we're harvesting, but do we need to limit buck harvest in some WMUs? Are we killing too many yearlings? And if we do need to, how do we do it? We don't have to reinstate antler restrictions. There are many options for that. But anyway, this is something we need to look at. So for a little more clarity here, this has nothing, well, obviously it's related, not directly related to the regulation changes. So this is actually a goal in our big game plan. Under the larger goal of maximizing hunter satisfaction, we have this buck age structure objective. which is to ensure that there are enough older bucks on the landscape to provide hunters a reasonable chance of seeing one. We know from multiple surveys that most hunters want more mature bucks or a better chance of seeing or taking mature bucks. So this is the objective we put in our big game plan. More specifically, we said we want to maintain what we had in 2018 in terms of the proportion of mature bucks on the landscape in each WMU. So in 2018, that was when we wrote the plan. We had that's when we had the most recent data we had when we wrote the plan. That was also the most mature bucks we ever had since we had data. But we should be able to maintain that. And again, and the other thing I'd emphasize here is this is the portion of mature bucks on the landscape, not what hunters take. Okay, and that is very difficult to measure. So that what is available to hunters is what we can control in this sense, or what we want to control. But it's very difficult to measure. So in trying to come up with something easier to measure, our strategy was essentially something that would measure the harvest rate, what proportion of bucks are killed by hunters every year, right? If hunters are taking too many bucks, too large of a percentage of the bucks that are out there, you're not going to get any to older age classes. They're not going to survive long enough. So you need to maintain a relatively low harvest rate. A little modeling said, well, if you have too high of a harvest rate, you're going to have at least 50% yearlings in your harvest. You have to, because there aren't enough older bucks. So you end up with this higher percentage of yearlings. So it's an indication of how high your buck harvest rate is overall. So we set this 50% threshold, right? We do not want our more than 50% yearlings in our buck harvest in any WMU. Over the past 2 years, 2020, none of them were. There was some weird age structure going on, but none of our WMUs were even close to 50% in 2020. 2021, we had 3 WMUs that exceeded 50%. 2022, we had 2. This year, don't have age data yet, but based on looking at the percentage of spikes and 4-pointers in the harvest, we're going to be very close in WMU C, D1, and D2 again. I think this is a very legitimate concern. Definitely in D1, probably in C. D2, I think I'm on the fence a little bit, whether that's, we need to worry about it. But definitely in a couple WMUs, we are probably harvesting too many bucks to meet our buck age structure objective. We will have better data after this year and better after another year, but something to think about. I think at the very least this year, we are going to make hunters aware that this is a concern and that if they don't start passing yearlings, we're probably going to have to restrict something. But maybe letting them know that, I don't know where to go, but this is something we need to watch. Yeah, so those are the 4 things. And then, there may be other opportunities to tweak other things. I don't think we want to do some grand overhaul of deer regulations again. I know I don't want to do it. But I think there are some changes we can make and some potentially new opportunities we can explore. So this will be some of the discussion we'll be having next one.
Nick?
Right. Yeah.
Quick question. I know you talked about it's the amount of it's the larger buck that are on the landscape, not that are taken by hunters. The same is true with the yearlings that are taken, the spike horns, whatever, that are taken. We're looking at how many are taken. We don't know how many are on the landscape, but
that's not likely to move the needle for.
What would be interesting is that and just more out of curiosity, if you take where the largest deer in Vermont are taken and overlay that map on top of where the yearlings are taken, where that's exceeded at 50%, to just see if they're completely, or maybe are they completely different zones? Are they in the same zones? And is there any correlation whatsoever?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, you know, and we don't have, I mean, we're only collecting basic weight and antler points, right? That's the data we have from most deer. Weight is a decent indicator of deer size, except I don't trust any weight unless one of our biologists is present. So I wouldn't base too much on that. And then antler size, you know, most deer in Vermont never get beyond an 8-pointer. And I'm sure, as you all know in here, 8-pointers can vary from 8-pointers to 8-pointers. So there's a lot of size range there. So it's really hard to get at, you know, like trophy deer versus younger deer. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Brad, I think we can look at, like, you know, where are all the 8-pointers being shot? Or the highest proportion of 8-pointers being shot, and is there anything, are there any patterns there? I think there's a lot of ways that I can, and I'm sure will, look at this to try to see, you know, get better insight into what is actually going on here and whether it's something we actually need to worry about. It may not, you know, the 50% threshold was our best guess. It may not be exact. That said, I did look this morning at you know, the proportion of, well, basically say 8-pointers in like D1 compared to other areas, and at least in the harvest, it's lower than it was pre-regulation change. But again, if hunters are now just shooting the first legal deer they see, it doesn't necessarily mean those deer aren't out there. It's just they're shooting a spike horn before they get the chance to shoot a larger deer. There's a lot to figure out there.
Thanks.
That's all I have. So, any other questions?
Well, comment, I will say I was one of those hunters last year where I took a spike horn on the first day and proceeded to see an 8-pointer come walking up to me a few weeks later, or a few days
You
later. So,
contributed to that stat.
yeah, I did, yes. Thank you, Nick. Any other questions? Nick?
I would say if folks have questions that they think of later, feel free to email me or John and we'll get them to Nick and we'll get back to you.
Another quick question, Nick. This is back to the moose. Just curious what your take was on the tick situation this year, just as a first look at the moose after deer season. And I know that Maine, I mean, we'd heard a couple years ago where they collared, you know, a large amount of calves, and the percentage that died was just outrageous. But I heard that last year they collared something like 70 or 80, and then they had a very, very high success rate. And I was just curious if just what that means to us, or what are we seeing relative to moose?
Yeah, so tick counts are a little tricky, but generally speaking, they seem to be staying, I'll call it, relatively low. It's still a ton of ticks, but it's not as high as it's been in the past. These things do tend to vary regionally, like tick numbers. I mean, we see the same pattern. We tend to see the same pattern in Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont in a given year. You know, tick numbers go up in Maine, they'll probably go up here too, but maybe not as much. Yeah, and to build on what you said, 2 years, so Maine has collared about 70 calves for the past, I think they're on their 10th year now, every year. 2 years ago, they lost 87% of those collared calves to winter ticks. Last year, I think they only lost like 20%, which was their best calf survival ever. I believe they're collaring more this year. They probably haven't actually collared them yet. But anyway, our tick counts across the region, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, were all relatively low this year. So suspect it's not going to be a terrible year.
So for the calves that, I think you said there were 2 or 3 calves that were reported in the fall during moose season. Just didn't know if you were able to gauge, you know, the health of those calves, or if that's just too small of a count to even draw any kind of conclusion or opinion.
Yeah, it's too small of a count. We just don't get enough. I mean, you know, we would need 10 or 15 calves at least to say anything meaningful. And so, yeah, not enough.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to new agenda item, maybe 3A, discuss entering executive session. So Catherine is not here this week. So where can we look for some, I guess, guidance on this?
I think you have language there.
Okay. So we are looking to enter into an executive session to get some legal advice or advice. And so we do need a motion to enter into executive session.
I'll make motion to discuss legal advice.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Oppose? Okay, the ayes have it. So, what we will do is we will enter executive session. We will be, instead of asking the public to move, the board will move to a new room, which means there will also be a new link labeled executive session for the board members and department staff to move over to that. Members of the public, feel free to stay. We will be back to conclude the meeting afterwards.
That link will be sent to us.
Yes.
Yes, Abigail's gonna email it, David.
Thank you.
I just think that the language, you need to read the whole language for that.
I didn't hear
Okay.
that.
Well, you know what? We're fine. We can just go. We've already voted.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, so take 5-10 minutes to make the switch.
Let's see.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, again, just choose, yeah, very straight. You would have to, wasn't have that is what happened.
They do ask it. Having a very.
Hi, honey.
Yeah.
And what I'd say.
Is there some mistakes? What I would like to do, make sure that
Very, very smart. That's the space.
You know, there's that, but obviously this is the same thing. This is Brad, yeah.
Yeah, I say my favors, that's why for that week before I shot. Yeah, I mean, she's good.
Am I not in the right meeting?
You're good. No, I'm. You can hear that all.
With the, well. Makes me wonder.
You make a prayer.
Around 15. See.
Like going to teach.
Yeah. Chop that now, it's like.
Yeah, so, and, I saw there's something for. Awesome.
You guys doing tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. I think so.
You got those?
Not a lot of brands like Are you now?
I live with. Most days. Yes, there is.
Pretty sweet. Well, I don't know how they I got like now, but yeah. Yeah.
We don't.
It's not really us. I don't know, but there's also like, yeah, I'm there. So.
Things that would be saying you would never let me say. I heard the talking of anger for nation.
That's what I got. Yeah, that's fine. Like, wow, this one, but I feel like that is very potential.
It's only, 25. It's tears.
Yeah, I mean, you can still. Yeah, in theory, it lets you. Well, how many interest right off? Yeah, and she was like, I don't think we'll see
Yeah.
So this
yeah. Yeah, Warren's, yes, off Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Marty, like,
Right, yes.
You know, I've got spotty. That's the complication. One activity.
Yeah, I think something called bucks. Yeah, and that's what they said. This sounds like, that seems like better spin.
So.
Yeah. We would want to get out there. You can leave like. You have a spring.
Yeah.
Sure. That's like what you want.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I mean, that should do it. Yeah. Yeah, that's not, yeah, that's not really.
We did it.
Yeah.
Jared.
Well, right. He cut Jared. Then someone is coming by.
It's, you know,
I mean, just like, especially. Yeah.
That's always done for this stuff. And then you go on to
You have a better feel of like what. Social.
Wildlife management versus.
Oh, I get so far. Let's see, ask me here. Probably more hair fall out, really, so. Yeah, it's coming back. I had it. I'm not buying one of these guys. You guys. I had. Yeah.
Introducing it.
Every day, it's just like literally. Shower. And here. Sure, there, like it, but. Shower.
Yeah.
I know they have. There's, I think that's three. Upper that. Yeah. I haven't been on there, probably mentioned it.
Three sitting in the top row. And two behind us.
There's like 60 people coming to day one.
There's a lunch there, and like just where you were sitting, kind of thing, like it's pretty much trying to protect that. It was like, it's, he does very little. That's an I, and everyone, and everyone just as you would anything done. You won't find this. Shake off. Yeah. Pretty informal, sure.
It's already true.
Stewards is.
Oh, that's who it is.
Yeah. Okay, right, it's like, like.
Yeah. So that is fun.
I just research out.
He's got like, we got two. Oh, yeah.
So. Yeah. It's very. It's a gift.
Here's a one page really just that I mean last year how something stopped there, so it's gone on, so. The new rate was two
You guys.
Oh, Marsha seems bad stressed. Like, yeah, because. Yeah.
Which is, it's fine. It's great because you get going.
Especially.
John, that was.
Long, it's been a long range in that patch. Pretty much. Corresponding, yeah, and perceptive average. I see. Yeah, I mean, as soon as any of us else expresses, yeah, for the same, can we be high?
Yes, he's actually. He has been yeah.
So the next one's on the ground, let's stay on.
And he cares. I think most people.
Yes, sir. It's seen. And this year it's like, yes.
Yeah, and better than that. Yeah, yeah, humor. Did he not send you that email? Email.
Yes, sir.
Like the shares so full of all those things that have
We used to.
functions in. I think it is. So yeah, actually, it's so sad, no one else is saying that, but it's very, very, is that. Senate connection. And again, like.
Yeah, there you go.
Mars, like, we're doing that, and figuring out how we can. And. That's gonna make it.
Yes.
This is important.
Yeah.
Testimony.
No, but.
Just ensure.
You will be.
This would have to be.
I don't know. You have bread out every day for you guys? They usually have like this, like. Long salad bar portion. Purpose lose overnight. Motive. Yeah. So, squad based up, so like, I were in a student. I had to go. Because five things. Everything's one. You live with, you got mostly these legs. It's literally like. Josh Christian, thing with everyone. I believe you. When there was, you know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was, yeah. Skills and physical. Yeah. And worked out with like. She was the worst having something. And we did it once. Hated that. So much so. Yeah, so I use like yeah, that. That's conversation. But it was good.
I think the longest run we did was like 9. We're actually running. We're running up that. Yeah. Gotcha.
I'll guess the longest one is.
Really?
It's like super.
They were doing a bit of that on the other, like the hit.
Yeah. Strategic consideration that.
I don't know if it's okay with that. We have to go
That's too. So it's hit and miss.
We changed the green.
You're going into the best time, the casual wants to. It's just like, traditionally, it's like, I said the summer, like, the summer. Yeah, like, it's just like psychologically. Then for like, yourself, like, this way, like. Yeah, and then you're like gaining more freedom. Getting nicer. And it's just like. Pushing some far away. Yeah. You didn't, yeah. Yeah. I saw that version. I do not. So we all get like water. We're supposed to go. It's
watch The Conjuring and take a shower.
Oh.
I have to leave it like it's pretty gorgeous. Yeah, I'm on a thank you. What? Like, like I could definitely get constant if I didn't have the video. Yeah, she's like upset. Yeah. That's pretty good. A lot of links back. 89 was picked on.
Yeah.
Do we have all board members back? Here's we
I
do.
think we do.
Oh, well.
Am I there?
Yes.
Yes, you
Good.
are.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience, public. So due to the pending litigation against the, Fish and Wildlife Department and board, the board will be looking to, appoint someone to, represent or coordinate between the AG's office and the board.
Hang on a second. Have you come out of executive session yet?
No, we have to take a vote.
You have to make a motion.
I make a
I'd like to
motion
make a
to
motion.
come out of executive session into our regular meeting.
Seconded.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Again, yeah.
Opposed? All right, welcome back, everyone, out of executive session. So, due to pending litigation, the board will be looking to appoint someone to coordinate between the AG's office and us. We have a motion. Right.
I will make a motion, Chair. I'd like to make a motion to have the commissioner lead all communications with the Attorney General's office in consultation with the chair of the Fish and Wildlife Board to, on all pending actions, against the board.
I'd like to second that.
Question, Mr. Chairman. All
Yep, go ahead.
action or this action against the board and department? I don't, all means everyone forever.
You're correct. I will rescind,
Thank you.
rescind that motion. Thank you, Dave. And I would like to reword that motion if, to say that, the motion is to have the commissioner, lead communications with the Attorney General's office in consultation with the board chair on matters, on pending actions relative to the current,
Rule.
current rule, where there are actions against the current rule.
I'll second the revised motion.
Is everyone clear on that motion? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Oppose?
No.
One opposed. All right, thank you, everyone. So moving on to Commissioner's update. Commissioner, take it away.
Well, as I think at the beginning, we have 3 new wardens sitting in the room today. So that's good news. And yesterday they met with 3 living retired colonels. And in that way, some of the good tradition of the department was passed on to them. It's a pretty valuable experience. I think they would all agree, correct? So when you nod your head. Yeah. Mhm. So we're happy to have these folks coming along. They start the academy in 2.5 weeks, I think. So good luck. There's a number of bills being introduced. It's early yet in the session. So if you don't know how to search the legislative web page for bills, reach out to me and we can show you, but I think it's worth folks keeping an eye on what's going on in the State House. And other than that, that's all I got tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does anyone have any else? Let's see. Any other comments from board members? Thoughts? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you, everyone.